Well, I think we should turn that question around. It's really whether we can afford not to. This country in particular, we have a great resource in the wind. We know that in the future we're going to have to compete in a low carbon world. And if we don't make offshore wind work at a competitive rate, no one else is going to do it for us.
And I think, most energy investments are very long term. An offshore wind farm will be operating for 25 years. So although the gas price at the moment is low and has been low for a year or two, previous to that it has been a lot higher. So I think we can't just abandon offshore wind. We need to keep going with the technology so that it's there for the long term, and that over that time costs can be coming down.
We have to remember costs are already coming down. We have recent evidence that it's already come down a fair bit. We're well on track for it to be as low as £100 per megawatt hour by 2020. There's a lot of collaborative working between government and industry and with other European countries to make sure that we can get there, we can achieve our aims.
And we know that the cost of energy from, say, onshore wind and gas-fired power stations is very, very comparable. And the truth is that in the UK at the moment, no power station gets built without a government contract. There are different subsidies, whether it's a fossil-fired power station or whether it's a low-carbon wind power station. But actually nothing gets built without a government contract. So it's not a subsidy in the sense of doling out money to somebody. This is a structural thing to allow people to invest in replacement power plant that we need. And the price that's traded in that market is based on a 40-year-old coal-fired power station that's well and truly paid for. And so the only bit that's reaching the market is the how much coal am I throwing into it. And coal is not paying for the carbon dioxide it produces, and it's not paying to replace an old coal-fired power station with a new one. So actually it's an old versus new argument.
If you spent £1 billion building an offshore wind farm but it failed to produce a single unit of electricity, that wind farm would not receive a single penny in subsidy. And therefore the structure of the subsidy really, really incentivises developers to build really, really efficient projects.
It's only a subsidy if you set what's called the strike price at a level that's above what's really needed to get that thing to happen. And in the early 2020s, we would expect that the strike price for offshore wind will be below, for example, the strike price that's already been agreed for the next nuclear power station at Hinkley Point. So we will be at or around the sort of level that the government expects that we should be paying for electricity.
I mean, we've already seen really great results coming out of the first CFD auction where prices came down by, I think it was about 18%. So the sector has already proven that it can really deliver cost reductions. And I think in order to get there, I think there's a combination of different factors you need to really, really drive down the cost. Part of that is new technology, so things like much bigger turbines, which we're seeing starting to come into the market. At the moment, obviously, the cost of offshore wind is higher than the wholesale electricity price, so there is a subsidy that's paid to offshore wind, and that subsidy is paid by electricity consumers. There's a debate to be had about whether or not wind subsidies should be paid for via energy bills or out of general taxation, but I think that's a debate best left for another day. What the offshore industry can do is to obviously make sure that costs come down as quickly as they possibly can so that the amount of subsidy that needs to be paid, whether or not it's from energy bills or whether or not it's from general taxation, is reduced as quickly as possible.
It is true occasionally, but it's true that every other kind of generation also gets the same kind of payment. It's the way the market works here in the UK. National Grid has something they call constraint payments, which are paid to any generator when the network is congested. We build the grid to a level that we can afford, and there are times when it's not got sufficient capacity. And what we've seen with constraint payments over the last few years is that those paid to wind farms are exactly in proportion to the amount of energy that's being generated by wind as compared to coal generation or gas generation.
The idea of constraint payments is to create a signal to National Grid so that they can see exactly where the investment needs to happen in the network.
And it's another myth. People believe that offshore wind farms don't pay for their grid connection. They absolutely do. The way the rules work, an offshore wind farm pays for the entire cost of its grid connection to the shore, and then a proportion of the cost of any onshore reinforcement along with other generators in that area. The big trigger that started investment was the announcement by the Crown Estate of Round 3 in 2010, and that held out the possibility of a large number of offshore wind farms. That was the trigger for companies like ours to invest in jobs, in new factories, in new models of wind turbine. And I guess the next phase of that is to see that getting built at a sustained rate.
That's it. I think the UK has got a really, really good pipeline of projects, and the critical thing now is to get those projects deployed so that costs can continue to come down. And we've already seen really good evidence in the latest CFD auction, so these are the subsidy contracts for offshore wind, where prices came down by around 18%, which is just brilliant news. But we need to maintain that momentum and just keep it going.